What's up, coding rabbits, and welcome to live coding with rabbitwerks JavaScript. My name is Sean, and tonight is episode 8 of the FullStack Authentication and Authorization from scratch, based on Coding Garden project. And if at any point my mic levels are too low, let me know, because I don't know, my mic has been quiet the last few days or something. Settings got goofed up somewhere, but that's alright. Yeah, so tonight we're going to be working on the last week, basically. For some reason, we built out the front end, the login view for our application, and so now we're going to switch over to the back end and get that login post route written out so we can start logging in through our user interface. Alright, so I just have both of the front end and back end servers are both running. And basically what we're going to be starting at is right here on router.post, and this is the index.js file inside of the auth folder. So if we look at our app, this is the backend app we have right now, and so we're using the router inside of the app.use is using this path and passing in this middleware essentially, which is this index.js file, and it contains the routes for our register and our login routes. So basically that's kind of like catching up on where we're at with things. If you want, you can check out the repo on GitHub and all that good stuff. Thanks for tuning in, Wanda Randy. I appreciate it. And Joshua's in here, of course, as well. Hey, dude, how's it going? Okay. So actually, before we get started, I just wanted to kind of preface this. A lot of this is going to be pretty similar to what we're doing here. For the register route, basically what we need to do is we're going to take in the rec.body that we're getting passed in. We're going to validate it against our not register schema, but we'll write a login schema. We'll validate it against that, and then what we'll need to do after that is we're going to have to we'll have two fields. It'll be the username and the password, and we'll have to hash the password. Then we're going to have to check the database to make sure to check for the added, or to see if that user exists, and if the user exists, we're going to check the hash passwords, and if the hashed passwords match, then we'll send back a response. We'll essentially send back a JSON Web Token, just like we're doing for when we register and it's successful. So a little bit different, but a lot of the same stuff going on. And then depending on where we're at with time, we might refactor out like this JSON Web Token .sign function to a function to its own function, and then we can just call that function instead of having all of this code duplicated and all that stuff. So cool, that's where we're at for tonight, and let's get started. Okay, so what we want to do is write down here, well actually before we go to that, we need to start by making our login schema. So what I'm going to actually do is, instead of typing out all of this stuff for the Joy schema validation, we're just going to essentially use this two properties on here. We're going to use the username, and we'll also want to use the password. So we can just duplicate this whole thing and save ourselves some time. I'm going to change the name from register schema to login schema, and then delete the fields that I don't need. So the first and last name fields, they can go. User class can go, and email can go. So what we should be left with is the username and password, and that's what we want to use for our login schema. So down here, now we can come down here and add our router.post, so our post request to our login route. We want to let's see, we want to actually make sure that we have next included in here, because we will be using this to forward any errors onto our error handler that is non-existent yet, but we will be there shortly. So okay, router.post login. What we need to do is we're going to target the rec.body, right? So let's see, how did they do it in Joy now? So okay, they updated their syntax. So what we'll say is const result equals login schema dot validate, and then we'll do validate async, because remember, if we just do what we got stuck on last week is validate async returns a promise, versus if we just did validate, then it would just be, we would have to use a callback. So we'll pass in rec.body, and that should be the stuff that we're getting from the login route. So it should be our username and our password, right? But we don't want to do that. Let's see. Where am I at? Oh, wait a second. Yeah, validate. Okay. Actually, we're not going to use. Let me see here. Oh, I see. I think in the front end we needed to use validate because we needed the promise callback, but in this case we're just setting it into a variable called result, and we can go off of that. So we'll go about it this way in the back end. So I'm gonna actually change. We can just end that right there, and instead of async or validate async, we'll just do validate. So we just get the value stored inside of the result variable. Okay, so then we should be able to say if we want to make sure there's no result.error, and then if that's the case, then we're going to we want to take let's see users.find1. Yep, so now we want to check the database to see if that username actually exists. So we'll say users, because that's our database, and we'll say find1, and that is a function built into Monk that allows us to query for a singular object. And then what did we search for? Okay. So we pass in an object, and then it'll be the property that we're searching for. So we'll say username, and then we want to say it's on the rec.body.username. So we'll check to see if there is any entries in our collection that contain this, that match this username, right? So if there is, we'll say, or not dot catch, but we'll say dot then, and we'll say user, because we'll get back the user if there is. Open up an object. All right, so inside of here is where we're going to want to compare. Well, we'll make sure that there is a user, but I think, let's see. If user, because I think that if I remember correctly, that okay, yeah. Okay, so we query the database, we're searching for the username and see if that's in existence, and then we are doing something with that returned value. So we'll call it user. So if the user exists, if there's a value for user that gets returned from the database, we want to then check the password. So we could say, so this is where we're going to use bcrypt again. So we'll say bcrypt.compare, which is a function built into bcrypt, obviously, and it takes two parameters. It's the what we want to compare against what we're comparing it against. So you can see data, and then compare data, error, callback, promise, boolean, the data to be encrypted. Promise to either be resolved with the comparison result, salt, or rejected with an error. Okay, so the first parameter we're going to pass in is the rec.body.password. Wait a second. Am I missing a step here? Alright, hold on a second. Sorry, I apologize. I apologize. Does bcrypt or does compare, does that hash it automatically and then test it? I'm gonna check really quick because I can't remember off the top of my head. Bcrypt. Bcrypt. npm. Bcrypt. Library to store all your good stuff. Let's check password. Alright, let's see. Bcrypt.compare load hash from your password DB. My plain text password. Okay, so we don't have to hash it. Okay. So it'll hash it automatically based on this. I'm confused. With promises. Okay. So we're using bcrypt.compare. I don't know if you guys can see this or not, but I'll zoom in. I think it's just I think it just hashes it. We'll have to see what happens. I think I don't know where it gets the salt rounds from, because we don't pass it in explicitly. The compare function counters timing attacks using so-called time algorithms. In general, don't use the normal JavaScript string comparison function to compare passwords. With promises, bcrypt uses whatever promise implementation is available in global.promise, native promise, async returns promise when callback is not specified, if promise support is available. Okay, but that doesn't tell me if it's... Let's see, that's a good... Alright, let's just give it a shot and see what happens. Alright, so down here, I say, so bcrypt.compare, rec.body.password, and then we want to compare it against user.password. Alright, so that should give us a promise back. So if we say that then we can say result. Yeah, let's just see where we're at. Let's say console.log result. Alright, so if we hit this endpoint with a, Joshua says you just use the plain text password and the hashed one. Okay. Yeah, that's what I kind of figured, but I was just wondering how it gets the salt rounds, because the salt rounds refers to how many times it's rehashed, that like rehash before it returns like the actual result. Am I correct? All right, let's head over. Let's open up our front end and see where we're at. Apparently this isn't running locally. All right, here we go. Excuse me. localhost 8080. Okay, we're in the register or login route. Yeah, the nice thing about bcrypt is comparing is super simple for us devs. Yeah, good point. Okay, so I believe we still have our rabbit usernames in there, so let's just I can actually, I'm gonna close this, switch over to the backend shell, and then kill this terminal, so we can just have the log here. Alright, so I think it was rabbit10 is what we left off on, password of ASD123, hit login, true. Alright, cool. That's all working. Awesome. Okay, so we got it's comparing the hash, the password. So if we do an incorrect password, so if we do like that, what is it going to say? False. Okay, so it looks like it's working. Excellent. Massive shouts. All right. So what do we want to do now that we're checking to see if the passwords are working? So essentially what we want to do is send, at this point we're going to take some information from our user object from our database now that we know that that's the correct user. We're going to create a new object and send it back to the front end essentially. So it'll be a couple different things. We'll probably send, so MongoDB automatically inserts that ID. The underscore ID property into their anything that gets added into a collection through them. What's going on here? Then okay, so result. Okay, inside of here we're gonna say if put an if statement in. We'll say if result triple equals true. Then we want to create a new object. So we'll say const payload equals an object, and inside of here we'll have a few different properties. So we'll start by doing the ID, and that again it comes from when you insert elements or insert items into Mongo, it generates the ID property for you automatically, and we can use that throughout our application to finitely target different data sets and data properties and stuff based on that underscore ID property because it's unique. Okay, so that comes from user._id. The next thing we want to do is we'll probably send the name back just so we know who we're working with. We'll do user.name, and then you can send back as much stuff as you want. Just make sure you're not sending back the password. Whatever's in, but we don't necessarily need everything, so we want I guess it's subjective to the where you're at with or what you need for your use case, but in this example we'll just do a few different things. So I want to make sure that we're passing back the username obviously, and I also want to make sure we're passing back the user class because we're going to technically use that to differentiate our different users by what class of user they are essentially. So if they're like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, kind of like how we talked about in previous streams and stuff like that. So user class, just so we have that, and then yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could send back the email, but I guess it doesn't really matter. If you're wanting to like I mean, you could log in using we could set it up where we could log in with a username or using an email address as well versus like a username and stuff like that. I know that's something that they do in UI development and stuff like that. You can log in with different types of credentials essentially. We won't have to worry about that tonight. So I think we'll just send these four back, including the ID for now. All right, and then So now that we have our payload written, let's see where we at. We gotta write some else statements really quick. Make sure we don't get caught behind anything. All right. So first of all, we need this one right here. Else console.log, and it will be where are we at? Where are we at? So this is if like it doesn't pass the schema verification or validation. So I guess if we say valid credentials, they'll think that it's just like wrong or something like that. Please enter only acceptable characters. Okay. Actually, you know what we should do is let's write a little error function, error response error, so to speak. So let's go to the top here, and underneath our schemas, give ourselves a little bit of breathing room here. And we'll say, oh yeah, you're right, good call. Joshua was saying that there's no user.name. So it would be user.firstname or user.lastname in this case. We don't just have a name property. So actually, let's just take that off. We'll just pass back the username and the user class, because that's all we really want to use anyways. Anything else could be seen as like sensitive information, I guess you could say. And the less stuff we have to worry about, the better. Okay, so let's write this error function really quick. So function response error, and then so this will take a couple different parameters. We'll have we need to give it, we need to pass in res, we need to pass in next, and we'll also give it status code. So res and next come from Express, and then status code is going to be just a number we're passing in to generate which response code we want, status code we want to send back with this. So what we'll do is we'll say res.status, oops, and we'll say in here we'll say status code, and we'll create a new error. So we'll say const error equals new error, and inside of here we'll just say unable to log in. So let's actually say say unable to process request. That way we can use it in both the register and login route without it kind of like inadvertently tying itself off to one or the other. And the next thing we want to do is then just call next, and we'll pass in our freshly created error. Cool. So now if we call this function in place of like these console logs, so we can say instead of console log, we could say response error, give it, we'll pass in res and next, the actual things, because we need to give it into this function. And then we will just say 422 for like what is it? Unprocessable entity, I believe. So if we get an error with the validation, so if we have like well, actually we probably wouldn't even get that far with this schema because we have validation on the front end. But if we were to get an error right here, it would throw it's gonna handle this error, or it's gonna essentially throw this this error that we wrote up here from this function into next. Which by the end of this episode, we should probably get that written out, the error handler part for our global error handler in our app.js. I should probably do that right now, actually, since we're on it. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so if we want to, let's actually take a second and write this global error handler for our applications, just so we don't have to worry about it anymore and it's done and done for or whatever. So at the bottom of our application here, we can write a couple of functions. We can also do it up top here outside of the Express app, but I'll just do it right here, just for the sake of having it right here so we can look at it. So we'll say function, we'll do error handler, just like that. And this is going to get a number of different parameters in it. Remember when I was saying that in Express, it's kind of tricky because depending on when you're working with like routes in Express, the callback, the number of arguments the callback has determines what types of callbacks those are. For instance, so for this one we need here before I get in there, you can see that rec and res, those have two. They're going to be automatically set as the rec and the res objects get passed in as those properties. If we take a look at something like this one, we the register post route, we have rec, res, and next, and then that tells it that okay, there's three parameters. The first one's going to be rec, the second one's going to be res, and the third one's going to be next. So in this situation, we actually have four parameters that we're passing in, and it's going to be error, res, or rec, and res, and then next. So you might be confused. I was confused with this when I first came across it. I was like, well, how does it know the difference? I mean, if we just pass in two parameters, isn't it just going to be error and rec? Well, because we're passing in four parameters, Express automatically knows that the first parameter is going to be an error object, or whatever parameter. The second one will be the request. This third will be the res, and then fourth will be next, which we won't even need to use next, but we need to have next in here so we can get access to this first parameter error right here. Kind of confusing, but once you use it a couple times, you kind of get the hang of it, but definitely threw me off at first. Okay. So inside of this error handler, we're going to just write a couple lines of code. We'll say res.status because we just want to make sure we're setting the status. So we can either do res.status code. So if it's already been set somewhere, or if it hasn't, we'll just do 500. And 500, if we look up response codes. HTTP response code. So you kind of can get an idea of what they are right here. 200 is obviously okay. 202 is accepted. 204 is. So we're gonna look at client error response. So 400 is bad request. 401 is unauthorized. The one we were using in our index was 422, so unprocessable entity. The request was well formed but was unable to be followed due to semantic errors, so something like that. Another one, the common one, is request timeout, conflict, not acceptable. So, I mean, depending on what the error is, if you want to be more specific, you can send back the correct error code with your stuff. Excuse me. And then 500 is internal server error, so that's what we'll send here if there's no, this will be our fallback, essentially. All right, cool. The last thing we want to do is send some stuff to the front end to be displayed in like the UI however we see fit. So we just want to make sure we send the message over, so it'll be error.message, which comes in through our error object, which so what will happen is that once we're done writing this, any error that happens will be forwarded onto this error handler, and then we'll send that value of that error to the front end using this function. We got error message, and then we can send the stack. So error stack is dot stack, and you would probably want to do like if you had like a production environment and a dev environment that like you're only sending the stack trace back in a dev environment versus the production build or whatever. Okay. So now that we have the error handler route, we can use it, right? So we're going to use it just like any other middleware. And so right before we get to app.listen, which is actually where all of our requests to our server will be listened at, we want to make sure that we initiate the error handler. So we'll say app.use, which is a method essentially to use certain middlewares, or any middlewares throughout your Express app. So we can just pass in that function just like that, and that's all that she wrote. So now that we have that done, we'll go back to index.js and we can take a look and see where we are at with everything. So this is where we left off. All right, so we got the response error that we wrote out. Now we should actually be seeing this on our front end, so to speak, when we do encounter some errors, depending on when we start throwing the errors back. We have to go through and refactor a couple of these things. So you can see right here, next error, res.json error. That should probably actually be it. Yeah, so all those next, when we're passing in the error with these catch handlers and stuff, those will all be forwarded onto this error handler function that gets called, or that's getting used right here. Cool, okay. Alright, so let's continue on here. So we got this response, right? And we're going to, or the response error, we're going to also say else statement right here and pass in the response error as well. And then we also want to put it right here, so else. So this is the else if the result equals false, right? And we could change out these to what they need to be. I don't know. Interesting. Okay. So we have our errors in there. So we're checking the passwords, and if they match, then we're creating a payload with the ID, the username, and the user class. So what do we want to do next? Well, we want to send this to the front end. Well, we need to assign a token and send this along with the token to the front end. Okay, so let's see here. All right, yeah. So let's see here. I'm gonna actually, for right now, I'm gonna take this whole thing. So the JSON Web Token or JWT.sign, and I'm gonna copy it because we'll actually refactor this out into a function at a later point. But for now, we just need this whole process again. We're gonna change out a couple bits of information. And then yeah, we just need to change out the name of added user to result. Oh wait, no, it'd be user, not added user. Okay. Alright, so here's what we're going to do. Underneath const payload is our user object or whatever. We're going to give ourselves a little bit of room here, and then we can we'll paste in that JSON Web Token.sign function and change out this added user to just be user. Excuse me. And same with this right here. Alright. Excuse me. Where are we at? Cool. So let's see. What this is doing is essentially we're assigning a new JSON Web Token. So the payload is this right here. So we're passing in our ID, right? So if we look at here, we got payload, which is a string or an object. We have our secret or private key, which is next, options, and then our callback. So you can see that this is our payload. We have our secret right here, our options object, which basically just is we're passing in an expires in parameter, so it'll expire in 1 day. And then we have our callback. So with all this in place, we should actually be able to log in or get at least a JSON Web Token in response to our request here to log in. So let's change this up. We'll do ASD123 because it's the password we're using for this username. And let's see what happens. Let's bring this up. Everything's running still. All right. And let's see. Inspect. Boom. There we go. Cool. We have a token. All right. So, okay, cool. So what we'll do now is we're going to refactor this JSON Web Token function to its own function so we don't have to have such duplicate code everywhere. So I'm just going to take this whole thing and instead of, because we just copied this in here, I'm going to actually cut it out. We're going to come up here and under our error response, we're going to write another function and it'll be called, so I'll say function, and it'll be create token send response. Right? Simple function, and we're going to get our user passed in here. We can paste that whole thing in there. So it gets user. It'll also get our res object because we need to be able to access res, and we also need to be able to access next if there's any errors. So we also need to add that in as well. So we have user, res, and next. All right. So actually, I think to be more consistent, we'll do res, next, and then user for our custom data. Right? Follow me so far? Cool. Excellent. So we'll take this and we can actually come down here now and we'll say create token send response, pass in our res, our next, and our user, just like that. Right? And we can come up here to our, so this is the register post route, and we are creating the JSON Web Token right here. Again, delete all of this. And say create token send response, and we'll also pass in our res object next function, and in this case we're doing the added user because it's a little bit different. So we have added user being returned from when we insert a new user to the database. This is what gets returned and has the ID and stuff like that. Right now the password is being sent back. Uh-oh. Oh, good call. Excuse me. My throat is so clogged right now. We need to delete the password again. So just like we did right here, we need to remove that password attribute back or away from out of this user object. All right. So before we call create token send response in our login route, we'll just say user dot, or we'll actually say delete, and it'll be user dot password. Cool. Thanks for that catch on that, Joshua. Big appreciation on that. All right, let's try this one more time and see what we got. So rabbit10, ASD123. All right, we got a user object, we got a token, no errors. All right, the username, or the user does not include the password anymore. Excellent, cool. Where are we at with things? Oh, okay. Let's see. What did I do here? Oh, I see. Okay. Let me just double check, because Joshua pointed out a thing in chat. He said, or you use the payload object you created but didn't use. So that brings me to a realization. So we didn't use this payload. We should actually be using that. And then I just want to check this new user, added user. Oh, that makes sense. We don't need to send all this stuff. So let's actually, yeah, let's switch over from user. Let's just change that to payload. Just so we're not sending all of that information over to the front end that's not necessarily needed, depending on your use case. So let's try one more time. Let's say rabbit10 password. Okay. All right. So in this instance, we just have our user class username and then this ID, Bob. Okay, cool. Thanks for the heads up there, Josh. Appreciate it. All right, cool. So we're doing pretty good on time. I think what we should do right now is we're going to write one more function on our main app.js for our excuse me. For our backend, and it's gonna just handle like if we run across any pages that aren't found or any routes that don't exist. So we'll have like a not found error handler or a 404 handler essentially. Okay, cool. So what we can say is we'll write a new function. So we'll say function and we'll give it a title of, or a name of not found. This again, we'll get res, rec, and next parameters. Open that, the body up. All right, so if we come across a route that we don't have in our application, we want to throw an error that says it's not found. So we need to first set the error code, so, or status code. So let's say res.status, and that is going to be 404 for not found. Let's create a new error along with that. So we'll say const error equals new error, and we want this error to say not found. And then we'll concatenate a property from our request object, and it's original URL. Original URL. Oh, case like that. Alright, and then let's just forward this on to our error handler. So we'll say next and pass in our error, just like that. Alright, and then like our error handler, in order to use this function as a middleware, we just need to register it essentially as a middleware. So we'll say app.use right above our error handler. Everything we want our error handler to be the last thing before our app.listens. That way, no matter where any errors happen, it all gets caught with the error handler, because it'll just get sent all the way down to the last thing, the last part of Express, lines of Express. I don't know how you would say that. Okay, not error, or app.use error not found. So okay, cool. So let's give that a try. If we were to go to log in like that, it's going to give us an error. Might just fall back because we're using hash mode on. Oh wait, we need to go to. I'm sorry, we're in the wrong thing. We need to be doing this on the route. Or I'm sorry, the backend. Alright, let me see here. Let me pull up the backend really quick. So localhost 337. Welcome to the auth from scratch backend. Cool. And if we go to test, res.status is not a function. Alright, where's that coming from? App.js 25. I have it backwards. Alright, so we need to do rec res. Let's try that. Let's see what that gives us. Found, not found. Okay. Alright, so this is the error handler giving us our error with our stack trace. So that's working. Cool. And if we have rabbit10 and we do the wrong password, that gives us an error, unable to process request. Unprocessed accessible entity. Alright, wait a second. Are we sending this to the front end? Yeah. Oh, it's coming back right here. Let's see. Res.json. User token. Next error. Error. Process request. Where is this one coming from? 84. No. Cool. I think everything is how it should be. So this is just a browser error, I believe. Login. Okay, so yeah, that's because we reached an endpoint that isn't valid. Oops. Or whatever. And it's giving us, instead of actually throwing an error, it's giving us a console log with that error inside of it so we can debug essentially. Alright, where are we at with things? So let's see, let's jump over to the front end really quick, and I don't want to really get into a whole thing right now. We only have about 10 minutes or so. Basically, so what we're going to do with this is if we have a valid token inside of, so yeah, I don't explain this the wrong way either. We log in, we get a token back in response, then we'll be logged in. When we have that token in storage, what we want to do, and I actually got to look this up this week, so I'll have to look into cookies and stuff because I forgot to do that, so my bad. But I'll get on that as soon as possible, because we'll more than likely, instead of using the local storage like we started off doing, we'll be probably just using a cookie to send it, because cookies get sent automatically with each request that's made, if I'm understanding that correctly, instead of having to check local storage every request and pull that token out of essentially, local storage and whatnot. I don't know. Apparently cookies are a more better way to do it, so we'll look into that. But basically what we'll do is that when we look at the router here, we will have a couple of we'll have a protected route. So it'll be essentially, let's see if I could find an example of this that's already going. Because this is actually, to be honest, this is as far as I made it in the prototype. So for anything after this point, we're going to be pretty much trying to code together as we go. I mean, I've done the project before to completion when I did this the first time, but as far as this prototype with the updated code and stuff like that, I think this is about as far as I got into it. So take what I say with a grain of salt after this. Nah, it's all good. But let me see here. I just want to pull up. Let's see. This is okay. Client, source, router. I'm gonna pull this router into here so we can take a look at it. Okay. So right now you can see that we have local storage token. Yeah, I swear to God that token was a thing, but I don't know. So essentially, so this is our view router from that DJ Encounter website that I've been, well, that's been on hold until recently because of, we'll just say, content delay. But anyways, the life of a web dev, am I right? But anyways, light function. This function is logged in. Basically, it checks to see if the local, if that token exists in local storage, and if it does, then we will pass in the route to be used inside of our router. Otherwise, if we don't have local storage token, or if our token isn't in local storage, we're going to redirect to the login page because we won't technically be logged in. So right now these are commented out, but if you take a look, basically you can say before enter is a function, essentially a hook that runs when we pass, that we can hook into it when we make different, we're navigating through our site to different routes and stuff, or different pages and views inside of our front end. So say we go to, we want to go to this like admin route, right? So before we go to that admin route, before we actually enter into the route, it's going to check and run this function. So we get to, from, and next. To is where we're going, from is where we're coming from, and next is like, I can't remember the next. It kind of works the same way as, oh, next is essentially like the push function. You know what I mean? Like, so we have this dot $router dot, or this dot router dot push, and then we pass in a route. Next kind of works like the same way. So next to route, or next to login, or whatever. So you can see with these hooks, again, it's we get to, from, and next passed in, and it's a function that runs because it's a hook, and we run that is logged in function to check and see if we have the token in storage, and if we do, we'll go to next, and if we don't, we'll go to the page. Or I'm sorry, if we do have the token in storage, we'll go to the desired route, and if not, we'll fall back to login because obviously we're not logged in. We don't have a token in local storage. So that's kind of a little bit high level overview of what we'll be working on next session. Will probably be this Saturday, either in the afternoon or in the evening, depending on my schedule. So, but I definitely want to shoot for this Saturday for another session. We can get this front end, and then along with the router being updated to check with all this good stuff, we're gonna just create a quick little like a second view or a third view or whatever, a dashboard view, so we can have an actual page that we can get to, that's behind a login wall, essentially, that we can only access if we're logged in. So that's gonna do it for this episode. Yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to shoot it in the chat. Rabbitwerks Discord, I know there's not very much active people on there anymore because of, I don't know, I just have a hard time gaining members, I guess, but it is what it is. I'm not too worried about it. But again, Rabbitwerks Discord is the best place, quickest way to get a hold of me. So if you have that, otherwise, GitHub, I guess. I don't know. I don't really have social medias anymore because of personal reasons. I just don't want to deal with that anymore. So don't really have Twitter. Don't really have Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. I mean, YouTube. I'm gonna probably start trying to simul stream on Twitch as well, kind of like what CJ is doing at the Coding Garden. I'm also have some plans to do some really basic. We're gonna be learning Python, so not to like spoil too much of a surprise, but I probably have a special guest, a younger special guest with me on some future streams coming up that will be learning Python together in a very beginner friendly, very simple and slow paced, because I'll be learning it and the guest will be learning it as well, so from scratch essentially. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So keep an eye out for those if you're into Python. It'll be kind of like a pair programming thing. Also, we have talks of doing a live coding session or live coding series with Mike from HTML All the Things on doing kind of like a a vue.js, you know, basically a Venom Stack app for a Christmas list, or Christmas list, a holiday shopping list, if you will, in the light of the spirit. So we'll probably get, we want to start that at the end of November. I we'll probably try and bang that out within like 2-3 coding sessions. There'll be a longer duration, I'm sure, because we want to try and get it out, you know, within within the chronologically appropriate time frame. We don't want to be finishing the project in January after the holiday season is over, but we'll see what happens. So keep an eye out for that as well, and I think that's going to do it. So let's push this code. All right, let's go to here. CD server get let's see, get checkout -b. We'll say fsafs -s for the server, and it's our 5th branch. We'll say it's the login host route. All right, get add all, get commit -m, update login route with bcrypt and JSON Web Token added. Nope, add. Excuse me. What did we do? We added error handling functions, and I think that's it. And refactored to reusable code. Alright, cool. Get push -u for setting the upstream as origin, and type in the name of the branch that we want to push. And bada bing, bada boom. Wait, did it work? Oh crap. I didn't commit anything. Shoot. Let's try it again. Gute commit. Oh no. Oh, it's failing. Everything's falling apart at the last minute. It's just like NASCAR. Why? Alright. Git commit. Push that. Okay, now let's try pushing it. Alright, that looks a little better. Cool. Alright, so the code should be live on YouTube or GitHub if you want to take a look at it. Let's link it really quick. And I'm happy to say that I have completed the Hacktoberfest challenge for 2019. So hopefully I got it in time to get that t-shirt, but you know, if not, whatever. I tried to get some pull requests made to the vue.js official docs, but they got denied because somebody else beat me to the punch on this one issue, and then this guy didn't see that my markdown edits were sufficient to warrant being merged into the docs. So I was just like, whatever, man. This is why people don't want to get into open source. And not even that. Let me just stop for a second. I mean, I'm not even really that worried about it, but it is kind of disheartening when you just gotta you make a pull request to some open source repo and they just are just like, well, no thanks, but no thanks, essentially. And I'm just like, well, can you? I get it. I'm not worried about that. I don't care if you use it or not. But for me as personally, I would really like to know, like, your reasoning, your thought process behind why you're denying this pull request over another pull request, just so I can learn from it and I know how to correct myself, or you know, some improvements for the next time I go about making a pull request that might be able to get merged in. Give a little bit of feedback. Don't just say thanks, but we're gonna go with a different thing, because it's just like thanks but no thanks, and it's not constructive at all, and it just makes people feel like they're nubs essentially. But anyways, my rant is over. Be nice to people, give reasonings, give explanations, because we're all beginners at some point, and I find myself having to remind myself of that constantly too. So anyways, okay, where is this thing at here? I want to go to this. Sorry, I'm kind of dawdling right now. He's stalling for time. All right, go check it out. GitHub, it's in the description or the chat. Yeah, and I think that's gonna do it. So thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Live Coding with Rabbitwerks JavaScript. My name is Sean. It's been a pleasure to have you with me this session. And no matter where you are in the world, have an awesome night, have some awesome day, whatever. Wherever the sun is in the sky, or if it's not. I really got to think of something to say. But not right now. Anyways, stay awesome, keep coding, and we'll catch you on the flip side. Sharpie or Rabbitwerks out. Peace.